Hello, and welcome to another edition of News 6. This week, News 6 is brought to you by Mrs. Eshelman and Mr. French's 6th graders at Green Springs Elementary School in Green Springs, Ohio. Later on in the show, we'll learn a little bit about the history of Green Springs. We'll also find out how disabled people can learn to walk again, and we'll visit the world's largest natural sulfur springs. But first, Jennifer Dragon is going to tell us about a man who raises insects for a living. Jenny?
Riley Limegood and his son Troy raise colonies of bees for a living. They have 400 colonies of honeybees in their backyard and 700 colonies in Mount Victory, Ohio. They raise some of their bees for honey, but they also rent colonies of bees to farmers who use them to pollinate their fields. Recently, News 6 visited the Limegoods and learned how he cares for his bees.
Okay. Up here in our northern operation is mainly pollination. In order to get a perfect pickle that you like to eat on the dinner table, it has to be pollinated at least 8 times by a honeybee. Now, in order to winterize this hive, we have to make sure that it's got enough food on it. And what I mean by food is honey. And these are all frames of honey in this shallow super. If I can pick them up off the ground, then I'll have to feed them again. There's a lot of different ways to feed a colony of bees. We can take the outer cover off, and we can put sugar on top of them, or I can take a super of honey like I have here and put on them. Everybody gets yellow jackets and honeybees confused. Yellow jackets brighter yellow in color, and they're pests to society in the fall of the year. We have to wear gloves, otherwise we'll get stung. I have a veil here which has elastic around the top of the veil which fits around the top of my hat. This suit is a protective suit. It's sloppy and baggy in order to keep the bees away from your skin. Worst day of the season, I usually get stung around 200 times. This hive has approximately 80,000 bees in it, and it has about 80 pounds of honey on it. Hear all that noise they're making? That is because they're fanning their wings and sending the scent of the hive out into the air, and the bees that are in the air can smell that, and they'll come to that scent.
Thanks, Jenny. And now Kendra Sherman will tell us about learning to walk all over again. Kendra?
Lorraine Boyer is a physical therapist at the St. Francis Rehabilitation Center. She recently talked with News 6 reporters about how disabled persons can, with the help of physical therapy, learn to walk again.
What are some of the problems the patients have that make it hard for them to walk?
Well, many of the patients that are in the rehabilitation center here have problems because of illness or accident, and many of the illnesses would constitute, for example, a stroke patient or a patient that has multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, or some disease process, or many of the patients are involved in accidents, and the accidents cause paralysis of their arms or legs, and sometimes it causes them head injuries as well as spinal cord injuries, and this causes problems with walking.
How long does it take to learn to walk again?
Well, this is going to vary from patient to patient. With some of the people with spinal cord injuries or head injuries, many times it takes as long as a year. But most of the stroke patients are able to be on their feet and walking again, maybe with assistance, but in 2 or 3 months.
Why do they have to do special exercises?
Well, the exercises are geared towards each individual patient. Some of the patients have a great deal of weakness, and therefore we have to start out with very, very basic exercises. And other patients have just minimal weakness, and then we can go ahead and do some resistance exercises and build them up as rapidly as we can. So each individual patient has a specialized program in order to build the power in their legs. Sometimes we have to help move the knees, like this. Sometimes we have to help lock the knee, like that. And then he can take the other step. We use the parallel bars for a very base program in that when patients are first getting up to a standing position, the parallel bars are very stable. They can hold on to them, and we can be in the bars with them and help them walk. And then as they progress, then we can move them from the parallel bars to outside. We also use the parallel bars to allow patients to walk alone. And after they get to a fairly independent point, we can let them walk back and forth in the parallel bars and get some mileage so that they become more skilled in walking then.
Thank you, Ms. Bauer. This is Michelle Smoot and Arlene Stanley reporting for News 6.
Thanks, Arlene and Michelle. Next, Scott Alfida will tell about Green Springs' own historical museum. Scott?
The Watrous home is a small house that has been turned into a museum. It has been dedicated to preserving the history of the village of Green Springs. All the items on display in the Watrous home have been donated by villagers. The home was built by one of the original settlers of Green Springs. It was purchased for $20,000 by the Stumptown Historical Society in 1979. The village of Green Springs has gone through several name changes. Originally, the village was known as Stumptown. One of the members of the Stumptown Historical Society, Mrs. Hope McConnell, has been working on the history of Green Springs for the last 11 years. News 6 visited the Watrous home and learned from Mrs. McConnell about the history of our village. We saw an old wash tub whose sides have ridges. When the clothes were rubbed against the ridges, this helped to get them clean. We also saw a typewriter that was made around 1905. An old-fashioned wagon, and a baby buggy that was used to take twins Clayton and Clifton Cleveland for walks in 1901. Other items in the Watrous home include a bayonet and a cream separator and a stove that were used in households up through the 1940s. Thanks to the donation of these historical items and Miss McConnell and other members of the Stumptown Historical Society, the 6th graders in Green Springs have a better idea of the history of our village.
Thanks, Scott. Our last story also involves history, the history of the world's largest sulfur springs. Lindy Morrison will tell us about them. Lindy?
8 million gallons of water per day flow into a pool of water to form the world's largest natural sulfur springs. Because of their high sulfur content, the springs can often be smelled before they are seen. The springs were first discovered by the Indians, and they have greatly affected the history of the village of Green Springs. In fact, the name Green Springs comes from the emerald green color of the water. News 6 reporter Christy Popoka talked with Mrs. Elizabeth Schubaugh about this natural sulfur spring and the Indian legends concerning it.
The Indians called them the medicine water. When they left in 1831, they tried to destroy the springs and were unsuccessful in doing so, of course. And it became more famous about 1900s. At that time, Western Reserve owned this area and built 2 very large hotels where the St. Francis Villa is now located. And people came by the train loads and from Cleveland down to take baths in the sulfur water and to drink it, and they thought it was very good for them.
Did the Indians believe the springs had magical qualities?
Oh yes, they thought it was magical. In fact, the legend goes that they were discovered because of the Indian maiden who was very ill, and her lover was given the directions to this spring in a dream, and he came here and took the water back to her.
Thank you, Mrs. Schubaugh. This is Christy Popoka reporting for News 6.
Thanks, Christy. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next week when News 6 will be brought to you by the 6th graders from Shawnee Middle School in Lima, Ohio. Until then, have a happy Thanksgiving holiday.